Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Depth of Field. We're sitting here with an amazing photographer that I discovered a couple of months ago when the movie Dune was being hyped. There are many facets to professional photography, yet this woman that's in front of us and is going to be showing you some amazing work has really carved her own niche. Please let me introduce to you folks Chiabella James. Chiabella James is a London and New York City-based photographer. She works in feature film, still cinematography, and she also is an editorial and performance photographer. Her work is quite extensive, and she has some amazing projects that she has worked alongside of. And we're going to be able to show you some of this work and also talk about what makes Chiabella tick and how to get into this amazing industry. Chiabella, welcome to Depth of Field. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Very excited.
I'm very excited. I saw you were doing a talk for a school that we work with that's very influential, the Main Media Workshops, and that's how you kind of came on my radar. And of course, I'm a giant Dune fan, and you were the still photographer on the set of Dune, Denis Villeneuve's recent Dune, not the David Lynch Dune, and you did the still photography. How did you get started in film?
I joke that it's the family business. My father was a very successful, very respected unit stills photographer. And so I was effectively born into it. I spent my childhood running around after him on set and learning from him without any real concept that what I was living was any different than anybody else. You know, people get into the film industry. I've never been out of it. So it's an interesting dynamic for me, and especially when people ask how to get in. I can certainly tell you how to stay in, but opening that door for me was a family connection.
Did you have a camera when you were following your dad around on set?
I did. I did. I had a very basic little Canon. I was film at the time. It was before the digital age, and I had my very basic little Canon DSLR, and I would run around after him trying to sort of, I think from very early stage, I learned from him and I watched him and I absorbed that. But it was also, well, if you're shooting that, I'll go shoot that. There was a sense of rebellion in me against just copying him. So I think, you know, on a film set at a young age, there's only so many things that you're allowed to be doing. So I would find my ways to, you know, follow around, find little holes that he couldn't fit into that I could, and sort of found my own viewpoint that way.
And I assume that you traveled as well. There was a lot of locations outside.
Yeah, we were in school, so we basically spent every summer holiday wherever my father was on location. We would go and we would be on that location with him, which again sounds incredibly privileged, but it comes with its own challenges of, you know, while all my friends were at volleyball camp, I was in some remote part of the planet following around the circus that is a film crew. So it's been an interesting upbringing.
Can you care to share some of the films that you were scurrying?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's, you know, it's all his legendary work on, I think I was about 12. He photographed Saving Private Ryan. So, but again, you know, as a 12-year-old, you don't really understand that you're on a Spielberg set. That doesn't kind of compute until you get a little older and you start to realize what you've been through. And again, I would find any job that I could. So I was handing around sandwiches and helping the craft service team at 12 years old. He photographed Schindler's List when I was about 8. Band of Brothers when I was 15 or 16. So I spent a lot of my life on World War II movie sets. That feels very familiar to me. You know, guns going off and being part of the special effects world, which is also a strange thing when you've grown up with that and now seeing the world that we're in that's very heavily CGI and green screen. Seeing that shift has been interesting as well. But yeah, my childhood was spent on film sets.
Yeah, that's an interview for another time. But I always wonder about when an actor is on location and that informs their character and the scene. and now when you're in essentially a green room with electrodes on you, it's like must be a whole new skill set. Could you imagine Humphrey Bogart walking onto a modern set?
Yeah, I think there are some actors who really do well with that scenario because it leaves more to their own imagination. But I feel for most actors, because I've witnessed what the practical location can do for performance, for the whole, not just for stills. Obviously, for me, that practical visual allows me to present an image without it needing anything added into it or put into the background. But especially for an actor trying to get into that performance, I think being on those locations and being in those practical locations really gives them an essence of where they are and what they're performing. So I think it's important, and I hope post-pandemic doesn't mean that we lose that.
Well, listen, this is slightly going off topic from our conversation, because I want to talk about you, but I think one of the amazing things about Dennis, Denise, you said you pronounced it.
Denis, yeah, French. She's French Canadian, so it's Denis.
Is his use of location and CGI is a second thought. It seems like the location is first and foremost, and then the digital aspect of it comes in. So that's a conversation for another time.
But as you as a fan would know, especially in Dune, something like that, the desert is a character. It's more than just the location that they're in. It is their presence in the film. So yeah, I think absolutely in that essence, it's vital that you actually.
Blade Runner as well. It was it's another. These are sacred canons of a Gen Xer's film love to watch, and this this director happens to have done brilliant jobs with it. If the fans are happy and content, that's key. So, okay, just going back to performance, you got your start in still photography, aside from on the sets with your legendary father. You also did performance photography. Tell us. I did.
I rejected film stills. When I came out of university, my father kind of dissuaded me from the freelance film world. For obvious parental reasons. You don't want your child to have to go through that freelance life. It's difficult. So they sort of dissuaded me away from it. And I didn't want to just follow in my father's footsteps. I still had that kind of rebellious, I'm going to do my own thing. And so I went a completely different route. I went the film production route, but my love of photography didn't go away. So I found different outlets for that I could not be dependent on for a living, because I felt like if I was dependent on it for a living, I would start to hate it, because then you have to take certain jobs. You're trying to pay the bills. And I never wanted to hate my camera. I never wanted to not pick up my camera. So I did it just for the love of it. And I did portraiture and editorial. And I would pick and choose what I photographed. And I fell into a group of friends who ran a dance company in Los Angeles. And by the nature of dancers and a photographer, those two worlds came together quite quickly. And I ended up photographing their dance company for about 6 years. And what I found in that was an innate ability, but also it gave me the training that I needed to capture moments, especially in high action, right? So when you're photographing a ballet performance and there's a jump, if you get the image before they're extended or after they're extended, it could be beautiful, but it's no good for them. It's absolutely, nope, never see the light of day. So you really had to nail that moment that even the choreography was perfect. So the timing of that really trained me for what would then eventually become a role on something like Mission Impossible, where, the motorcycle or the punch or that moment, that very specific split second where that moment is an ideal photograph. So that dance work really set me up to be able to prove my chops when the day came in action photography.
Sounds like Henri Cartier-Bresson still rings true, right? It's the decisive moment.
Absolutely.
What are you shooting with or what are you shooting with currently?
Born and bred a Canon girl, so I have never let go of my Canons. They are still my babies. They still go everywhere with me. So I have the Canon 5Ds. and they've been through battle with me. But this new day and age of silent photography, I started shooting with the Fujis, and they have served me very well. In fact, quite a lot of what you see on Dune was shot on the Fujis. So I have a balance between the two, depending on what, where, when, and how.
I'm sorry, were you shooting Fuji X system or G system?
Yes, X. The G system is too large for on-set photography. It's great for specials and when you have, a selection of images that is not so broad. But when you're shooting all day, every day on a film set, those files are too big and unnecessarily big. You don't need it for that. So it's not worth the time that they take.
So that's good to hear. I shoot with Fuji as well, and my webcam is an X Pro, and we talked about silence, and I remember in the past I've been selling cameras for a long time, and back in the day, a blimp was what was wrapped around your camera because these old Nikon Canons with the mirror flopping up and down, they were loud. And let me tell you, Chiabella, as a portrait photographer, I actually like a loud camera, and just recently realized I don't care for these new silent ones when I'm working with a subject. That sound of that pace, that cadence that happens with a camera shooting. Sometimes I find models react to that. However, on a film set where there's a full audio group, probably not appreciated having loud cameras. So,
and hence my mix of bodies and style systems. And I find that when I'm doing the specials and it's me and just a performer alone away from a set, I agree with you. That sound, the Canons come out, or even just putting the Fujis on mechanical shutter. There is something about the energy between you and the person you're photographing that if they can't hear the shutter, there is something lost. They sort of find themselves confused and they're going, are you even taking these images? Like, what's going on? So there is definitely something visceral about having that sound. But yes, if you're on a film set and there's dialogue, nope, there's no excuse for that sound anymore.
I think that's the tactile and emotional connection between subjects, photographers, this piece of equipment that we have that's trapping the light and allowing it all in there, a romance to it in some ways. But yeah, on the film set, so that must be a big advantage. The mirrorless cameras are
it is a huge advantage. I mean, since they've come around, as I said, like the blimp, I do still have mine, but the weight of that when you're shooting 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, sometimes to be carrying that blimp with that system in it, that's a lot. That's physically a lot. And so to have, and even the blimp, I've had moments with certain actors where they can still hear it. So to have the silent, I absolutely love it when the boom operator or the sound team come up to me and say, "What are you shooting?" I'm not going to hear you, am I? And I'm like, I'm shooting right now. And they love it. So that's helpful.
Let's get right into some of your work, this recent work with Dune, and what's pretty amazing about it. So you're, first off, a film still, how do you describe yourself professionally in the proper language? I always get confused when we talk film and digital and cinematography and the stills. How does that?
So I guess because I come from the old school, I was raised old school. My mentality is still very much old school. For me, when I say film stills, I'm talking about a movie film because, of course, what else would you be shooting on? Nowadays, there is that confusion that people think, "Oh, you're shooting on film?" No, I can't. I would love to, and I do on my own time. But to shoot film on a film set, it doesn't work with the system as it is these days. It's too slow. You don't have the abilities that you have with digital.
Okay, so to further clarify, is the still photographer on a feature film set?
Yes, exactly.
What is your charter? Tell us what your job is, from the posters to the candids.
I suppose if I had to put it in a really small nutshell, then the job description is to sell the movie. That's the first and foremost. There is another element of documentation, But even then, 90% of the time, that documentation, other than for filmmakers for their own personal use, that documentation is also used to sell the movie to the fans, to whoever it is that's at the receiving end of that. It is about selling the product. So at the end of the day, yeah, my job role is to sell the film in 2D.
Okay.
So to give you the story, to tease it to you, to tell you what's going on without revealing the plot, without giving you any endings, without giving anything away that wouldn't make you want to go and see it.
And who do you answer to on the film set?
That's a really tricky question. A lot of people. There are different people that you answer for different things. So you answer to the studio marketing and advertising, because they're the ones using your images to put together a campaign. So you're answering to their needs, but you're also answering to the filmmakers whose vision you're selling. So you have to be able to incorporate both of those things into one. You're also answering to the people that you're photographing, right? So I have to be able to keep happy the people who I'm pointing the camera at. So there is a level of also answering to the cast, the filmmakers, even the crew around you who you're pointing a camera at. So those for me are the kind of the three main people that I answer to on a daily basis.
So when I look at these images, these Dune images, I mean, it's really pretty amazing, because you've got the world's greatest stylist, you've got great locations, you've got amazing talent in front of you. It seems like pretty much it's a perfect storm to walk into. Tell us how your skill as a photographer takes those elements that anybody would die to work with. I mean, to have Zadania styled in front of you in an amazing location would be incredible. But what do you strive to bring above what collectively is brought in front of your lens?
I think, and I don't necessarily set out to do this. It's not a sort of a strategy so much as an innate thing that has always been who I am and how I see what's in front of me. But for me, it's the moments. In the same way that if I have a camera out at a social gathering with friends, there are specific moments that make me go, oh, where's my camera? Let me grab my camera. I want to capture that moment. I want to remember that moment. And so I think I come at the whole process with that feeling. So the moments I'm seeing and going, God, I want to remember that, tend to be the same moments that people love to see. So that ability to find those images is really based on being a fan myself and knowing what I would want to see, what I would want to hold on to, what I would want to, frame and put up on a wall. So that's kind of the innate viewpoint of it. Within that, I guess there's this sort of unspoken list in the back of my head of knowing what those people that I'm answering to need. So if there is a moment in front of me where Zendaya is being styled, but, I can't see who's styling her, or it's sort of too dark, then I'll just enjoy that moment for myself. If there's a moment where she's being styled and she's in a key costume and the costumer and the wardrobe designer are all there with her and it's all, on a set and everything's kind of coming together in an image, then I know that that's the moment to pick up my camera and capture that moment.
Okay, now when that happens, this is my biggest question. Do you have a moment of one-on-one where do you get to direct these actors in these film stills, or are you photographing what the director is kind of bringing together?
So in the general sense, no, you're functioning in as an observer, right? It's almost like photojournalism. However, there are some moments that are either just between me and whoever it is that I'm photographing. Might be that everyone else is distracted and there's a moment between us where they are posing for me, there is something that they know I'm after that they'll give me. And those moments, those are me kind of going, we'll just do this, just let's come over to this doorway for a second. Those moments are minimal compared to the rest, which is very much seeking out imagery around what's happening around me.
So it kind of sounds like those one-on-one moments are organic at best, and if it happens,
absolutely, there are obviously versions of it where, you know, the filmmakers, the marketing team, we know there's something specific we need. Like maybe there's a costume that's going to be revealed. You know, recently I photographed The Flash, and the 2 or 3 first looks for the film, we very specifically went and photographed the glyphs on the costume. So that was, we took them aside, we lit them, we very specifically set up those shots knowing that they would be used for that. So there are moments where it is very much about stills.
But you still have what's kind of neat is that you've got grip, and you've got everything kind of comes together. You've got a movie team to come together to light your scene.
And that's what I always say, you know, some people talk about stills being a one-man team. And it is, in the sense of you don't really have a department. But when those moments happen, you have a film crew. You're part of a film crew. And so sometimes that film crew is focused on helping a stage be built because they need to be higher up. And that's everybody's focus. Sometimes we need a first look image, and everyone, filmmaker, actor, are all involved in this first look image. The film crew are then involved as well. So it is there. You are really part of the team in that sense.
Can you share your favorite moment on the Dune set?
Oh, do you know what? That project for me and that process was, I cannot say it enough, it was an absolute love fest. The team that came together, the head of departments across the board, are some of the loveliest human beings, as well as being the most creatively talented people I've ever come across. And to have so many people in one production fit that description, it really was a set that was full of respect. It was full of, creative genius. Obviously, we know that already. But there was no ego. It was really, and I pointed to Denis very specifically because, in my opinion, it starts from the top down. And that is the set he creates. That is the tone from day one. And if you're not going to be part of that, then you'll feel unwelcome here. It's really a special place to be. I didn't know that going in. I knew I wanted to photograph a Denis Villeneuve film because I have seen his films. So I knew I was excited in that sense. But, I've worked on plenty of films that have been difficult. And there is, stress and tension and a lot of egos in our industry. And there's a lot of that comes into play, even in between departments sometimes. And so I was prepared for that. I was just excited to photograph something beautiful. And I could never have preempted the experience as a whole. So to give you one moment from that production is really quite challenging, other than to say that from the first day on set, I was made to feel, even as a stills photographer who have a reputation for sort of being the outsider, it's like, oh, stills, what are you doing here? From day one, I was made to feel incredibly welcome, and whatever I needed. I guess if I had to specify a moment, it's not necessarily my favorite moment in the whole production, but it serves the purpose of an example. We were on the rocks in Wadi Rum, similar to the ones in the image behind you. And there was a little sort of carved out section high up in the rock that they decided to film an intimate moment between Timothée Chalamet's character and Zendaya's. And so they took a handful of necessary crew, camera, sound, and they were all rigged into these harnesses to get them up the rock so that they could all be around this little tiny cove. There was absolutely no room for me, but I was there, and you could definitely, if you were paying attention, see me looking and trying to find my way in, begging and pleading. And it was made quite clear there isn't going to be space for you. And we don't want to worry about you maybe falling off a rock, or so could you just back away for now? And I, the face from me is like, yeah, but that image. So of course I stepped away, and Denis, as I was walking away, went, I promise, we'll give you your own moment up here. Right. I was like, yeah, okay, cool. Okay. And they shot a few takes, they finished the scene. And as they all started to descend back down the rock, Denis turned around, and before Timothy and Zendaya could step off the rock, he caught my eye and he remembered, and he very loudly said, "Da, da, da, everybody freeze. I promised Chiabella she could come up here and shoot this." And so he absolutely made that happen. And it's that sense of, we don't have time for you. That's not important. None of that at all. So I guess that would be a good example of what it's like to work with him on that movie.
Very fortunate. It sounds like an amazing experience, and he sounds like a sweetheart. So that's pretty good. Okay, so thank you so much. You've answered so many of our questions already, but let's get into something. Essentially, you are a consummate professional within this world. And we've had other still photographers. We've had Dennis Kirkland spoke at the 2018 Depth of Field, and he worked on with Cameron on the set of Titanic. So it's like we have a bit of a tradition here at Depth of Field to get photographers of this level in. So let's talk about how somebody who's watching this interview, they may or may not be a Dune fan, and how they would recommend, how you would recommend they get into this industry, and how they can become a professional within this field. And you may also want to talk about there is a union, the local 600, which is the
yeah. So I think obviously, in order to get to a certain level in terms of the projects that you're working on, the profile of the projects that you work on, you do need to be in the union. And to get into the union, a lot of people feel like it's a catch-22 because you have to have the hours, but the hours only come if you're on the job. So it's tricky in that sense, but it is doable, and it does come, and it comes organically. And I was watching an interview with some actors the other day, some of the Oscar-nominated actors this year, and they were talking about how all of them at some point had hit this moment of feeling like it just was never going to happen. And I think the same feeling happens for photographers trying to get into the film industry and into stills. You reach this moment of just complete despair, where you think it's just never going to happen. I cannot catch the break. If you can mentally get through that and not let that stop you and just keep going, it will come. I've had plenty of big spaces of time where the work hasn't come and the phone hasn't rang, and I've thought, I'm done. And the second you start to think, okay, maybe I'll give it up, it won't come again. You really have to sort of, you have to want it badly enough to stick it out. So my suggestion to people, and even though I had the door opened for me, in order to get into the room, it's networking. It's the people it is very much putting your face in front of other people, reaching out. I get photographers reaching out to me all the time. As much as I can with the time that I have, I try to respond to them, because I get it. We've all been there. And I did the same thing. I reached out to every photographer whose work I admired, and I made relationships and connections. But that won't get you all the way. That might get you in the room. But in order to stay in the room, you really have to be able to prove your chops. And so my advice is to photograph music videos, photograph independent films, find a film school with students who are desperate for photographers who can't afford it, but they'll, happily give somebody the opportunity to photograph their film set. Because once you then do pay off in the networking and you are in the room, if you've got nothing to show, you've lost your moment. Versus you get in the room, you get that split second, and you can show them, okay, maybe not a famous face or a high profile job, but a film set is a film set. So if I'm looking at your images of a film set, no matter how small, and I'm going, all right, you got that angle, you've sold me this tiny film, I want to go and see this little film I've never heard of, then I know you can do that on a big project. So my advice is always to get in small, build that portfolio. I also think there's something to be said for working on a set, not necessarily as a photographer. My biggest piece of advice to anybody who's trying to get into film: go and do a job as a runner. You meet every department, you understand every department and how they function, and you get to understand the set, which as then a stills photographer, you have to be aware of that whole process. You have to understand everything that's happening around you, what to photograph, what not to photograph. So for me, having done that production route first, I feel like I have a level of intel into what's happening around me that I wouldn't otherwise have. And I think that's vital.
If I could sum up your advice, which is excellent, when you said never give up, we had a photographer that we used to show here at B&H. He was a street photographer, New York City street photographer, Len Spire, and he would always sign his email signature, never, 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 never give up, Winston Churchill.
Yes, I have that on my desk.
What a great and intrepid quote that is, because it really is true. And then the other thing I would say is that it's an old a lottery ticket advertisement here in the States, and it's you have to be in it to win it. And what you said about getting into the as a runner, even the catering truck, whatever it is, just to get into the gravity of what the film production world is like.
I think you also, and I say this quite often, and it was the fear that I had when I was trying to avoid it, when I was photographing dance and editorial instead. The fear I had was of hating it. And I knew that if I started to hate it, I wouldn't be good at it anymore. And what I have learned and what I have found is that actually I can love and hate this job all at the same time, because I love it so innately. It's such a part of my DNA and who I am and what makes me happy, that even on the worst possible days, I don't want to be anywhere else. So I think if you can hate this job and still love it, you'll be fine.
And also, Chiabella, fear, come on. Fear is the mind killer.
Yeah, exactly. Fear is the mind killer. Well said.
Okay. All right. So this is really wonderful advice. And I just want to talk about your personal work a little bit. And, I noticed one thing. I've been studying you, and I truly do love your photography. Even, your work on with Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible and Dune. Yeah, I mean, I want to say that relatively easy to make me love that work. But obviously, like all of us, you were affected by COVID and our changing world. And you evidently documented it, and you're on a project. And you talked about your COVID relief portrait project.
Yeah. So especially being a unit stills photographer, which has already in the past come up against people saying, well, do we need it? Is it necessary? I think they've tried getting rid of unit stills before for budget cuts, and it didn't go well. So we made it through that shift. And then when COVID hit, a lot of us were wondering, are we going to be the first to go? Are we going to be the first thing that gets cut from having too many people on set or the budget? So I found myself for months really questioning whether my job was done, if I was going to have anything to come back to. Fortunately, it has survived. But at that point in time, I really had to kind of come to terms with that and look at, all right, so I've thrown all of my eggs in this basket. Who am I without that? And I'd very much come to a place of also, alongside that, the timing of it was quite relevant, that I had really started to feel this need to express myself as opposed to my client photography. And unit stills photographers, unfortunately, we sort of get pigeonholed as just unit stills photographers. And there's this assumption that because what we photograph is lit by a DP, designed by a set designer, that we don't have our own creative vision. And in actuality, I think it's a very different niche, and we're simply skilled at that challenge. But of course, we can do any other number of things. And I felt a real need to tap into that for myself. So when COVID hit, it was kind of all of those things came together for me. And, everybody kept saying, oh, you should go out and photograph the empty streets and this moment in time that's happening. And I just remember feeling like, that's not the kind of photographer that I am. That's far too depressing for me right now. I'm not in a place to look at that creatively. I just couldn't. I know a lot of photographers did an amazing job with that. I just couldn't. That's not how I view. And so it took a couple of months for me until I started a portrait series that sort of came about by accident, where I have this series now of people, all walks of life, all colors, all ages, all religions, all backgrounds, and putting on a mask of somebody else's mouth. And by actually wearing the mask, it distorts their face, but also makes you look at them slightly differently and realize the face still fits. So it's this series that has really tapped into how we're all so different, but we're really all still the same, and how we all wear masks, right? So this huge global debate about wearing a mask. It was very much a pun on the hashtag wear a mask. And it doesn't take an opinion. It's not a political photographic series. It's much more about identity, and how the conversation we should be having is the metaphorical mask that we wear, because we all wear that mask. Everybody wears some version of hiding their true selves, and why we do that, and the effect on mental health. So the series that I've started is going to be in a book, and I'm self-publishing it and using it to raise money to support a mental health organization in the UK that helps young people navigate their mental health. And it's called Masquerade. And I'm hoping to have it finished in the next 6 weeks. But it's been a real, to call it a passion project doesn't feel right. It's been eye-opening, heartwarming. The conversations I've had with the people that I've photographed have really shifted my perspective of identity and how we view each other and how we communicate with each other. So yeah, I'm finally tapping into a level of photography that for me is more important than just the image. It really has a purpose in the world, as opposed to photographing movies, which is for entertainment. So.
Well, we wish you tons of luck on this, and also we'll stay in touch. Our viewers can go to Chiabella's website and follow her on Instagram to keep up with this project as it moves along. Sounds really wonderful. And as far as COVID affecting all of us, our theme of last year's Depth of Field, which took place, of course, in 2021 after that 2020, was turning lemons into lemonade, and being able to process through this changed world that we have and come up with new ways to creatively that. So that's pretty amazing stuff. And Chiabella, it was really wonderful having you here at Depth of Field and offering you the first full-time feature film still photographer that we've had just talk expressly about that. And I hope that our viewers can take your advice and get into this. And also, I just want to kind of thank you because I didn't know anyone that was on the Dune production crew. Dune was a very important film for me, and we followed it before the pandemic, and we were hoping to see it, and then it got, like so many things, the release date got pushed back, and I have to say it was really a great way to round out 2021, being able to go to the theater and see. I'm glad
everybody was able to see that, and I hope a lot of people saw it in IMAX, because it's a different experience.
Funny that you say that. I had saw the James Bond movie, which was another movie that was held back due to pandemic, and I saw that in IMAX, but then saw Dune in a Dolby theater, which until you hear a Reverend Mother using the voice on you in Dolby sound in a Dolby Pro theater, it's take my photograph. You just can't. It really boomed through you. It was an amazing experience, and it was a midnight showing, and there wasn't many people in the theater, even though it was Manhattan, and we all just adored it. So great work. Fun. Thank you so much. And we look forward to keeping up with you and your work as you move forward in your career.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Chiabella.